So I think it's been really interesting in the last year, I think during the pandemic, seeing the shift within the fashion industry becoming to talk more about regeneration. And I think it's kind of come from this sense that there is, I mean, it's been building for a number of years, but there really, I think, has been this huge recognition, both from the industry and publicly, about the negative impacts of fashion. And the way the fashion industry has been going about change, I think, in the last few years has been, or in the last sort of decade maybe, has been quite piecemeal of like, let's create a single line of clothing that is like our sustainable brand, or let's think about our one material that we're putting into things. And I think both people and businesses are recognising actually all of these things are not enough to kind of tweak those additional things. So it feels like the regenerative kind of conversation in fashion has come about from that sense of actually we know it's not enough to do these kind of small things around the edge. We need to really think about a more kind of radical and ambitious change. So that's where it's come from. I think at the moment it's still, the kind of conversation in fashion is still quite focused on particular materials and how that connects to agriculture, for example, which is really important because that conversation, I think, has been not around for a while. There's been quite a gap and a divide between like agriculture and where materials come from and then the industry itself. But I think it can be really exciting, and hopefully over the next year or so, seeing fashion think about actually how does that also go beyond materials into maybe how they work with the rest of their supply chain, how they kind of develop their business to enable them to kind of support people and the environment in the same way.
What is the link between this kind of regenerative thinking or mindset and circular design?
I guess I see it as like a really key mindset shift within that designers need within circular economy and to design for circularity, because it, I think it sort of sets you on a trajectory of thinking like, actually, firstly, we're working in a world that is interconnected. So when I make a decision about the fabrics I use, that has an impact kind of down the supply chain to where it came from. It has an impact on to where this is going to go in the future. And that kind of getting used to doing that kind of zooming in and zooming out, which I think they talk a lot about in the design guidebook. I think that is a mindset shift that is really helpful to start seeing those kind of nested interconnections. So I think it kind of underpins that kind of way of thinking. And I think that second piece is then around like, how do you create the capabilities for people to keep making change over time? So I feel like it's still those two areas of seeing things as independent and seeing things as like, if I create a pair of jeans that needs to go into the market, how do I also think about the fact that the kind of system around how people buy things actually might look different in 20 years' time? So bearing in mind those kind of different layers of things, I think that's what regenerative thinking helps you to kind of look at those different mindsets in new ways.